This episode of Two Lost Souls is brought to you in partnership with langbuddy.ai.
Therapy, as we know, is all about language. Words and their meaning help bridge that gap between us and our clients' understanding of the world.
However, like anything in life, practice makes progress. And if you're learning a new language, LangBuddy is just the tool for that. LangBuddy is an AI language bot that you can talk to on WhatsApp. And it's not just about speaking either. It's about listening and understanding. LangBuddy can send you voice notes so you can train your ear to your chosen language.
That's amazing. Is it available in French?
Oui.
Spanish?
Si.
Lithuanian?
Tape.
Japanese?
Hai.
Swahili?
Ndio. In fact, there are over 300 languages and regional dialects available, so we could carry on doing this all day.
Well, luckily, given that it's an AI chatbot, you literally can. There's no waiting for it while it sleeps or eats. The learning never stops. And given that therapy and learning go hand in hand, we are pleased to offer listeners of Two Lost Souls 10% off your first month of LangBuddy by going to langbuddy.ai and using the discount code Two Lost Souls at the checkout. That's langbuddy.ai with the discount code Two Lost Souls.
LangBuddy. Improve your language skills by chatting with an AI native speaker. Hi, I'm Ravi.
And I'm Shell,
And you're listening to Two Lost Souls.
the podcast that guides you through the journey to becoming a CBT therapist.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are listening. Welcome to the Two Lost Souls podcast. The title of today's episode is So You Want to Be a High Intensity Therapist? I am your host, Ravi Amrith, and in today's show we will be discussing the ins and outs of applying to a high intensity CBT course, fees and funding, and our top tips for the selection process. But let me begin by saying that this is your podcast guide to surviving a high-intensity CBT course. We pride ourselves on creating a safe space for trainees, qualified therapists, and those who are generally curious. Honesty is our policy, and we tell it how we see it, but we'd love to hear your views too. As usual, I'm joined in the therapy room today by the superb Michelle Sudbury. How's it going, Michelle?
Hey, Ravi, yeah, really good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How's your week going so far?
It's going very well. I've got a lot accomplished this week. I've done really well, got all my jobs done, so very happy. How about you?
Yeah, amazing. Oh, it's really nice to hear. Yeah, very good. I had the opportunity this week to go and speak to trainees at the University of Birmingham.
Oh, nice.
About my experience on the high intensity course there, which was really lovely. They had some really interesting and insightful questions as well, and it was a really nice thing to be able to talk to them. Actually, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Before we move on to our topic of today, let me just remind all of you out there that if you have any particular questions or topics that you would like to see covered, reach out to us on Twitter at TLS_pod or by email at twolostsoulspodcast@gmail.com. So, Shell, I will be perfectly honest. I've been suffering from a pretty bad case of sieve brain over the past couple of weeks. So I've actually already forgotten what lots of the application process for the high intensity course was like for me, despite it, only being last year.
Yeah.
Though I do distinctly remember sort of applying on a bit of a whim and feeling as though I was sort of flying by the seat of my pants the whole way through it. And
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what were your thoughts before you applied?
I was in a really fortunate position. So I didn't have to kind of go through the whole application process like most students would. I was already based in the service that offered me the placement.
Right.
So although I did have to apply, it was a very kind of last minute rush job. Application form was sent in. I went and did the academic assessment and the interview within a week.
Wow.
And then the course started the week after. So I didn't have a long build up. But I was very lucky. And that, that can happen if you're already working in services and you get these kind of last minute opportunities. There are spaces available, then that can happen. It's quite rare.
Yeah, of course. That sounds like you were on quite the whirlwind journey yourself. How did you sort of, there's a lot to be done during that sort of time period. So how did you kind of navigate that process, given that it was quite a quick turnaround?
I don't know, honestly. I think you just kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
It really was such a fast turnaround that there wasn't time to process it, to be honest. It was, literally come here, do the academic test. If you pass that, we'll invite you to interview.
Right.
I was lucky that I got to that stage. Went for the interview, and then literally the Monday after that, I started the course.
Right.
So I didn't have an awful lot of time to process. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think on reflection, it's probably a very good thing.
Yeah. Kind of means that you have to sort of speed through it without thinking about it too much and maybe having it put you off.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely if I'd known that there was this academic test to do, I probably wouldn't have even gone for it.
Right.
So...
Got you. So it's a good thing that you did do that. And sort of looking at your journey since then, obviously now you are sort of at supervisory level.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, so when you are sort of looking at potential applicants and people who are signing up for trainee roles and to go on a course, what sort of things are you looking for? What are the sort of entry requirements that people sort of need to meet?
So there are a few routes in, and so I think we mentioned it briefly on the introduction. We've got the KSA route, and then we've got the kind of more standard route, and that's for people who've already got a core profession. What we're really looking for when we're recruiting are people who have some mental health experience. You absolutely have to have that for high intensity training, and a kind of really vested interest in working in the kind of world of IAPT. That's really helpful. But yeah, I think we've had people from all sorts of backgrounds apply. We get mental health nurses, people who've done that job for a little while. We get PWPs. Once they've done their 2 years post-qualification, they're able to apply for high intensity. And a lot of PWP staff will see that as a natural progression. I'm not sure it is, actually, but for a lot of people, that's the next step. We also get a lot of people who are wanting to go on and do things like clinical psychology, and they maybe see it as a little bit of a stepping stone, which is unfortunate because it's not. It's a very valuable role in its own right. And social workers, support workers, HCAs, we get quite a lot of different people apply for the role.
Right, got you. So really a set of people from really different and diverse backgrounds. You mentioned there, Shell, this sense of people who are quite keen to work in the world of IAPT, and
Yes.
I'm just wondering, there might be people listening who haven't worked in the NHS before, haven't worked in an IAPT service before, might not have come across an IAPT service before, and I'm just wondering what you think sort of makes a good fit. What would mean that someone would enter that environment quite well and successfully?
That's a really good question. IAPT is very, I suppose, boundaried, and that there's not an awful lot of flexibility in developing and changing the role that you're employed in, because there are lots of constraints that come with IAPT. There are many benefits to that, in that the people who are receiving IAPT-led care can be confident that it's pretty consistent. So the training standards are all of the same, or all the same across the country, and the therapists are all trained and educated to the same kinds of levels. So what you're offered is pretty consistent across the country, which is really good. But it can be difficult to work in that environment when you are faced with some of the restrictions and barriers to offering the kind of care that you might want to. So if you think about things like session limits, not always being able to follow things like NICE guidance, not always being able to offer people the kind of therapy that they want,
Right.
because your service might not provide it. That can be frustrating, and I suppose learning to manage that frustration can be a big part of your development as a therapist, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose combined with that, a sense of sort of self-care in the long run as well, knowing that there are expectations on how many clients that need to be seen in a particular week, and managing someone's own well-being and their own workload, I suppose, with that in mind as well.
Yeah, you will always be busy as an IAPT therapist. Always. There's not really any downtime. We have times in the year where it's a little bit quieter for one reason or another, usually the summer. But typically you will always be busy, and it is about developing a resilience, a strength, and an ability to kind of manage that.
Sure. Got you. You mentioned at the start there the kind of two routes in sort of being either from an approved profession or going down the KSA route as well. And one thing I was quite keen to mention to any listeners is not to let the KSA kind of pathway, if you are considering that, put you off. I definitely remember when I applied, I wasn't quite aware that was something that I had to do until it was sort of sprung upon me following the admissions test, and noted that was something that we had to get in quite soon after the start of the course. And I did panic to the point of thinking that I wasn't going to pass it, wouldn't get one in, and would end up needing to look elsewhere for employment and explore other opportunities. But what I would say is it's a task that sounds very daunting. And if you are an established sort of mental health worker and you've done different roles in mental health, the track record and the documents that you need to compile that portfolio will naturally be there.
They will.
I think it's something that's very easily worried about, and much like a lot of things in CBT world, the worry is worse than the thing itself.
That's very true. It is a big piece of work. There's no getting away from it. It's a very big piece of work, and it's very daunting at the beginning when you very first have a look on the BABCP and you kind of discover what it is you're expected to provide. But you're absolutely right. If you've only worked in mental health for 12 months, you've probably got a really good variety of transferable skill, evidence, knowledge, and you can kind of evidence it to support your KSA. So it is much more achievable.
For all the listeners out there, we recognise that the KSA can be quite stress-inducing. We do have an entire episode dedicated to the KSA process coming up soon. And if you've got any particular questions that you would like to hear us answer as part of that, drop us a line at TLS_pod on Twitter, or at twolostsouls@gmail.com. Just in terms of another thing that might potentially put people off, particularly knowing the sort of economic circumstances that we're living in at the moment, sort of fees and funding and that sort of stuff. What does that generally look like for people who are embarking on the course?
So if you're on an IAPT approved training course, you will be eligible, you will probably be eligible for funded places from Health Education England. And that means that all of your fees for the university element of the course are paid, and you are also paid a wage. So you're employed on a Band 6 contract, and that means you'll be paid at Band 6 rate for the duration of your training year. There are some exceptions to that rule though. So if you've already had funding, so if you've already started a high intensity course and dropped out, failed it, then it's unlikely you'll be funded again for it. If you have only just completed a PWP, Psychological Wellbeing Practitioner course, you're not 2 years clear of from when you graduated, then you won't be funded. You won't be approved for funding. and you probably won't be approved for the place on the course anyway, even if you decide to self-fund it,
Right.
because they're trying to keep PWPs in that role. And then if you're a European or overseas student, because of the changes that came in following Brexit, again, funding can be very, very difficult in those instances. So I would kind of advise that you get some advice and discuss that before you make your application.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is a really good piece of advice. I think keeping those sort of channels of dialogue open, particularly with admissions teams and sort of hiring managers when it comes to the placement side of things as well, I think is a really important thing to do in the run up to just make sure that the circumstances around funding, particularly if you're an international student, are clarified as well.
Yeah, I think when it very first happened, I mean, I was on kind of shortlisting and recruitment panels, and it was a shock for us. We didn't realise the impact it had on international students at that point. So yeah, we don't get many apply now as well, because obviously the funding isn't there.
Right, got you. You mentioned self-funding earlier as well.
Yes.
What does that generally sort of look like in terms of a ballpark figure?
So I think the cost of the course for an academic year is £9,500, I think.
Wow.
But I will double check that and let you know next time. But then it's the wage.
Right.
How do you kind of fund your existence for the 12 months that you're training?
Of course.
A band 6 wage is pretty good. I think it's about 33,000 to start now with the increase that we've just had. So if you're self-funding, you're obviously not going to get that. And that needs to be factored in. I guess if you can afford to kind of live off your savings for a year and pay for your training place, on qualifying, you're eligible then to become a band 7.
Right.
So there's quite a big increase in pay after qualifying. So I think we don't get many people come down that route, to be honest.
No, I think it's also worth noting as well, so knowing since the impact of the pandemic, there's, particularly when it comes to the sort of teaching side of things have also changed in terms of remote delivery and things like that. So it might be worth kind of noting or worth having a discussion with the particular university that you're applying to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If it's sort of more feasible for you to attend from a different location and makes it more financially viable for you, see if that's an avenue that can be explored. But obviously noting that universities are also keen to get people in face to face where they can as well, but it might be a discussion worth having.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, at the beginning of the pandemic, everything went completely remote, which it did work, but there was quite a lot of impact on the trainees. That cohort kind of really struggled with that. But the hybrid way seems to have worked quite well. I just think, we don't know what's going to happen again in the next 12 months and the next 18 months. So if you're kind of really only looking for a remote placement and university offering, you're probably not going to find that now.
Of course,
yeah.
Let's take a short break and we will be back with more very shortly. Welcome back to Two Lost Souls. You are listening to the episode entitled "So You Want to Be a High Intensity CBT Therapist?" I think that's what the title was. I might have lengthened it since I said it the first time.
I think you added CBT.
Oh,
because we just said high intensity therapist, but we are being accurate by adding the CBT.
This is true, and CBT is my life now. I was told this morning by someone who may or may not be in this room opposite me that I am such a CBT therapist.
But we need context to that.
Well, okay. I'm acutely aware that I mentioned the incredibly cheesy quote of saying that, the journey up Everest always begins with the first few steps.
Which is very true, and it's really inspirational. but it's incredibly CBT therapist.
It is. It's also very Instagram worthy. So if anyone wants to do that in like a really fancy font and put it on Instagram and credit that to me, I would be eternally grateful.
Is it yours to be credited?
I have no idea.
No, you just stole it.
Did I? From who?
I don't know, but I've definitely heard it before.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I apologise. Surely it's open source. That's a quote that anyone can use.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's not copyright.
Do they not have it on fridge magnets or something?
Probably T-shirts, mugs.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm brave enough to wear it on a T-shirt though.
I might get you one for Christmas. I'm thinking about it. Thinking about it.
And that's the end of the podcast. For no, it's. Thank you. I'm trying to decide how much I would appreciate that, given how much of a cynic I am.
Well, we will see
Okay,
when you get it at Christmas.
Okay, cool. We'll find out. Talking about sort of a general overview of for people who maybe haven't decided on whether they do want to embark on the process or not in today's episode, and moving on now to sort of the uni aspect of things. Generally, what do the sort of commitments look like on the university side of the deal when someone embarks on this journey?
So typically, you'll spend a portion of your time at university. The course that I did, it was 2 days a week for your academic element, and then half a day that was provided for study time. So 2.5 days, and then 2.5 days on placement. And whilst you're at university, it's kind of sectioned out, looking at your different disorders and models, and you're normally at university for a year. So some courses run the traditional September to June, July kind of time, and then some courses do January to December. I'm not aware of any other kind of start times for any other courses across the country, but those are the most common.
Got you. Okay. It's worth mentioning as well, it was stressed on the course that I was on that attendance was a BABCP requirement as well, in terms of having a certain percentage of attendance rate, and attendance was monitored quite a lot throughout the course as well. So just bear in mind that if it's a journey you're thinking of going down, it is a journey that you're going to have to dedicate quite a lot of time to, and make sure you are available for those 2 or 3 days a week, depending on where you are studying, and make yourself available to go to university.
I mean, if you've kind of pre-booked family holidays and you know that they fall within academic term times, then that's going to be a problem, I'll be honest with you. So it's really thinking about that before you know, a year in advance, before you even think about applying for the course, making sure that you're booking your holidays and things in the downtime, the holidays, because it probably won't be approved. Any time that you do miss as well, you usually have to make up for by doing a piece of self-directed learning. Sometimes that's a written piece of work that you have to produce in your portfolio to evidence that you've kind of investigated the topic that you've missed, and done some research and reading about that. Sometimes I think some of the universities have some different ways of proving that you've got some knowledge in that area,
right?
Such as retakes, things like that. But each university will have its own rules.
Yeah, got you. I think it's definitely quite a demanding year in terms of your sort of eating, sleeping, and breathing CBT for that entire year, and everything else almost has to take a bit of a back seat for that period. So I think that's a really important consideration to make. What are the sort of, do you have any tips for people in terms of what that sort of balance could look like between obviously not only the academic side of things, but also factoring in that they've got placement work alongside that, and also just, I suppose, general time to holistically look after themselves and continue functioning as a human being? Do you have any tips for that side of things?
Yeah, I think so. If we kind of come at it from the placement perspective, if you're in a kind of good IAPT service, you should always be offered support with your well-being. It should be something that's routinely discussed with you to make sure that you're doing well. So either in something like a management supervision or with a buddy, if you're assigned to a buddy. I think routine is definitely the key.
Right.
getting yourself into a good routine, not falling behind. You know, if you need to have 200 clients, 200 client hours before the end of the training year, think about how that's going to look. The university will support you and guide you and give you some ideas about how you can meet that target. And it's very achievable, but it's not achievable if you're not kind of committing to that on a weekly basis. So you need to be booking in the right amount of clients. You need to be kind of monitoring your DNAs and cancellations, talking to your supervisor, talking to your peers and the rest of the cohort to see how they're getting on. Because it's not just that you're going to be doing client work, you're going to be doing notes, you're going to be doing mandatory training, you're going to be doing your academic stuff alongside that, and then trying to look after your family, your pets, see your friends, and not neglect yourself. So it's really busy.
Definitely. You spoke there about the sort of 200 hours of clinical practice that one needs to get over the course of the year. Just to mention as well that there are also kind of academic requirements over the course of the year as well. So you'll need to present 6 full session recordings over the course of the year.
Well, 3... sometimes more, because you've got to pass all of those.
Right.
So your supervisor ones, you can submit more than 3.
Right.
But you need to pass at least 3. So it's not just thinking, oh, I only need to record 3 of my sessions. You need to record all of your sessions in order to be able to get enough passable CTSRs.
Of course, yeah. And to anyone listening that's maybe working in a different position in healthcare or mental health, the prospect of recording your sessions can sometimes sound a bit daunting, but just to assure you that once you've kind of dived headfirst into it and after it's become a course of routine for you, it does become something that you're a bit more used to and a bit more something that you're open to listening back to in a reflective manner as well. I think typically when you first start listening to a recording of yourself, it's really difficult to get past that sort of, oh, I sound horrible. Is that what I sound like on tape? Which is coincidentally, for anyone out there considering making a podcast, a similar thing that you go through when you edit a podcast. But after you kind of get past that initial kind of surface level kind of reflection on what your voice sounds like, it does tend to be a really useful tool on your tool to reflect on your skills.
Definitely. And we were really lucky because some courses you have to video yourself as well. Right. So you've got to actually kind of produce video recordings of your client sessions. And I think that's a whole bigger prospect. I'm glad I didn't have to do that.
Got you, yeah. Alongside sort of session recordings as well. So not only are you submitting the sort of full hour sessions, so those 6 or at least 6 full hour sessions, but you're also having to submit recordings to supervision. So you must pass the supervision component of the course as well. Yes. And alongside that, there are things like case studies as well that need to be written, and acknowledging that there may be some people considering this pathway who haven't come from an overly academic background. What would your advice be to them? So I'm not academic at all, actually. So I had a degree before I went in to do the postgrad. But academically, I've never been kind of naturally gifted in that area. So I had to put a lot more work in than perhaps some of my cohort. I think my biggest tip in that respect would be think about what your strengths are. So I am a good therapist. In the room, I'm a very good therapist. Yeah. And I think remembering that and just kind of reflecting on the work that I do made it much easier for me to kind of transfer that onto paper. Right. Things like literature reviews. Right. Things like literature reviews still fill me with dread. Clearly I'd blanked what they were called out of my brain because they're that traumatic. But if you put the effort in and the time, you can get through it. And that's all you need to do. You just need to get through those elements. Your practice will be listened to
by the university. And I think if you've got that really good balance of being a very good empathic practitioner and an average academic, then that's not a bad balance, to be honest. Equally, if you're very academic, you might want to think about how you transfer some of that skill into your therapy delivery, because sometimes it can be a problem if you're very academic, because you're very model driven, you struggle a little bit with the compassion and the empathy in the room, and so you always need a balance. So I wouldn't worry too much if you're not massively academic. It is a big part of the course, but you can get through it.
Yeah, definitely. Also, when it comes to the application process, there is also sort of an academic sort of screening element to it as well.
Yes.
That can, for some people, be the point where the panic sort of sets in on that side of things. But one thing to note as well, we are going to cover some of that sort of stuff and maybe some tips and some handy strategies that might be useful for that.
Mm-hmm.
In an episode all about the application process as well. So stay tuned for that if you are looking for some more information on that. I think the other thing it's quite wise to mention as well is that it's in everybody's interest to see you get through the course and do as well as you can as well. So I think if you are having difficulties, if you are finding that things could be better for you in particular areas, I think flag it to your tutors. So usually you'll have a personal tutor at uni who you can approach, or alternatively your placement supervisor as well, because I find that the interface between university and the placement is a really powerful thing as well. And so I think it's just a case of, if you are having difficulties, just flagging it early.
I would completely agree. I think the people that I've known, the trainees that I've known that have gotten into trouble, it's where they've just tried to carry on, and for one reason or another have felt worried about sharing that they were having some difficulties. There's nothing to worry about. If you let people know, then hopefully things can be put into place to make it a better and easier process for you. You're absolutely right. If you hold the idea in your head that it is in everybody's interest that you pass. So we need the workforce, firstly. So we want people to pass because we need more clinicians. The universities want you to pass, because if you don't, it doesn't reflect well on them, does it? So nobody's kind of out to set you up, or you're not kind of stumbling into traps and things like that. Everybody wants you to do well, but they can only do that if you share and you're very honest with them.
100%. So we've talked a lot today about potential challenges, and at times we've kind of stressed what an intense year it is. What's the sort of carrot at the end of the journey? What's the sort of pathways that people can kind of go down after they've got this qualification?
I think even before that, it is worth saying that your training year, although difficult, is also amazing in many ways. You can make some really good friendships. You can develop very good professional links. You learn a lot about yourself, I think, and you develop a new kind of resilience. So it's not all bad. It's a really good year in lots of ways. And then at the end of it, hopefully you get the career that you've been working for, and that is in most cases that is working within an IAPT service, delivering step 3 high intensity CBT interventions to people who are experiencing those kind of moderate to severe mental health conditions. And it's very rewarding. I think it is. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that it's an experience that you kind of need to make the most of while you're going through it. I think there's something to be said for, or being reminded as well, that when the university journey is over, the journey as a whole isn't over in itself. I think you are always going to be continually evolving as a practitioner and continually reflecting on your skills. I think it's worth noting as well, because I think that some people have a bit of confusion around this, But when you finish the course and if you pass, you don't become accredited at that point. That's kind of when you lose your L plates, but you gain your P plates. And generally you get provisional accreditation from the BABCP after you pass.
After you've applied and paid for it.
And after you've applied and paid for it.
Yeah, that's another thing to factor in as well. It can be, there are costs associated to working in the NHS sometimes.
Yeah.
And your accreditation is something that you pay for, and it's not something that trusts will pay for you.
Got you.
So it's a little bit like your nursing validation, that kind of thing. You've got to have it. You've got to pay for it yourself.
Got you. And after meeting certain criteria while you've got your P plates on as well, you can then become fully accredited.
That's correct.
Well.
Which is easier if you're on a BABCP accredited course.
Right. Got you. And I suppose after that sort of full accreditation and that sense of getting the P plates taken off, I guess the sky's the limit really, in terms of being also able to consider other avenues, including sort of agency roles and working privately and things like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's out there. Obviously, the ideal would be to keep as many practitioners in the NHS as we can, because we need them. We need them to be offering the services that we offer. There's not enough of us. I think there's a national shortage at the moment. So, but yeah, absolutely. If you kind of need more flexibility in your working life, if you don't want to do this as a full-time pursuit, and you just want to kind of dip in and out, then bank, agency, definitely. Those are options. And private practice can be quite lucrative if that's something that you're interested in, because you can charge quite a lot of money per hour. Right. Or working for the private sector, things like Bupa and Spire and things like that.
Yeah. On the academic side of things as well, I think it's also worth noting that for those of you who are more sort of educationally minded as well, there are also sort of top-up master's courses that exist as well. So after you've done the postgraduate diploma, you can go ahead and earn some extra credits at another university to kind of top that up into a master's by doing a bit of a research component to do with CBT as well. Which is also something to be considered. Cool. Is there anything else you think we need to cover?
No, I think that's basically how you can start your journey to becoming a CBT high intensity therapist. I'm sure there are other routes and things that we've missed, but I think those are the most common routes in and problems that you might encounter. But also, you're absolutely right. We need to balance that up. There are lots of benefits to doing it as well. And we do it and we like it.
Yeah. Just reflecting on that and just reminding everyone of a quote from the first episode where we introduced ourselves. I genuinely think that my training year was probably the best year of my life. Yeah. For a variety of reasons. You form really close links, as you said, with your cohort, which I think is a really strong thing. And I think that point you made about sort of learning about yourself as well along the course, and just encouraging you to be more reflective and adopting an ethos of kind of continually learning, I think is a really strong thing that the course embeds in you.
It does, yeah, that really does.
Also,
you got to meet me, Ravi, as your amazing supervisor.
This is true.
I'm not surprised it was the best year of your life.
I mean, I was going to get to that. I was going to I was saving the best for last.
Thanks.
But it's true. I think, and this is another thing. I think sometimes when you apply for a course, you can maybe think that it's going to give you the whole kit and caboodle on how to do something. But I think the beauty of something like therapy and CBT is that you can meet 27 different people and they will do the same thing 27 different ways, and you will always learn something from someone else that you see practice or someone else that you talk to about practice.
Definitely, that's really true.
Speaking of other people practicing, actually before we get to that, I would just remind everyone as well, if you are going down a sort of different route to get onto a high intensity CBT course, let us know. Drop us a line on TLS _pod on Twitter.
Yep.
Or at twolostsoulspodcast@gmail.com. And speaking of that very particular email address, we have had some stuff in our mailbag, and so we are going to explore a few things in a segment that we like to call Socratic Questions. So, I said we were going to explore some things from our mailbag. There was actually only one email that I wanted to sort of pick out for today's episode, because I thought it was quite relevant, really. And although this segment is badged Socratic Questions, it's, I think, more of a bit of reassurance for people that were applying to the course. And I thought it was really helpful to include as part of today's episode for people who are, particularly if they're feeling quite ambivalent about going down this route.
Okay.
So this piece of correspondence, which is a very posh word of saying, this email comes from Fiona from Wales, who said, "When I applied, I was really concerned that I only had a diploma, where most other people applying had a degree. The assignments were a big concern of mine, as I don't class myself as being very academic. However, I learned that you can have a degree or a master's or the highest qualification in the world, but in this line of work, none of that matters. There was help available from the uni if I needed it, but once I got started from the course, it was okay, and I learnt that the thought was the most overwhelming thing. It's more about whether or not you are empathic and can build trusting therapeutic relationships with people. As long as you are willing to learn about models and formulations and build your understanding of them, then I think that's good enough."
Oh, wow. Okay, so that really kind of validates my point from earlier.
Yeah.
She's absolutely right. You do not have to be the most academically gifted person to do very, very well on the high intensity training course. You need a whole subset of skills. Even lived experience, that's so undervalued. If you're coming into something like this with a very empathic view of mental health because you've lived with it, or you've lived with somebody who's lived with it, then you're bringing along so much knowledge and expertise in that area. And why wouldn't that be considered valuable? So I love that that's her reflection. Just on that point about having a diploma, if you meet the KSA criteria, you don't need a degree.
Yeah.
And that's really important to kind of emphasize. I think a lot of people are mistaken in that belief that you've got to be educated to degree level to get onto a high intensity CBT course. And you don't. You just need to be able to fulfill the KSA criteria requirements.
Well, I think on that as well, I think that's a really important kind of systemic point as well, in terms of acknowledging that I think it's really helpful to have a range of therapists who have come from really diverse backgrounds.
Definitely.
And I think having therapists who don't have a completely academic background, I think is a really strong thing. And I think clients can relate to that a lot as well.
I mean, obviously I'm a bit biased because I'm not academic, so I didn't come down I didn't sail through with my academic ability. But I learned a lot from the people in my cohort who were very academic and had the knowledge and would share that with me and give me hints and tips. So you're right, you couldn't run a course like this if everybody was the same.
Yeah, got you.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of today's show, I think we've covered some really good points today, and I think we've shared quite a lot of useful information. Just to round off today's episode, if you have enjoyed or learned anything from this show, please give us a follow or let us know on Twitter at TLS_pod, or sending something through to our email address at twolostsoulspodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, if you do have any change to spare, please consider donating to our Ko-fi at kofi.com/TLS_pod, and links are also in the show notes. If there is someone who you think would benefit from hearing the Two Lost Souls podcast, we would really love it if you could share with them, because it is a huge help to the show and to us in terms of spreading the word about careers in high intensity CBT therapy. All that's left to say, however, first of all, is a big thank you to Michelle.
Thank you, Ravi.
A big thank you for listening, and just leave you with the information that this week a new CBT service is opening to treat photographers. The service will mainly focus on exposure. Have a good week, everyone. Take care. Two Lost Souls was presented by Ravi Amrath and Michelle Sudbury. To get in touch, contact TLS_pod on Twitter or email twolostsoulspodcast@gmail.com.